Yesterday I heard a colleague of mine, Monty Perry, describe our days as second verse days. And she was talking about the second verse of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Stony the road we tried, bitter the task we tried, felt in the days when hope unborn. Call these the second verse days. Hear, precious Lord, from that rhythm, my God, my God. Amen. I am delighted to be back here in Bethany. What a blessing. Look at you. You are all beautiful, gorgeous, and brilliant. Thank you for being here. I am honored and blessed to be in conversation with these extraordinary faith leaders, these minds, these brilliant leaders of men and women. Thank you for being here. Please read their biographies. Is that okay? Yeah. We're going to jump right into the conversation. I want to start with a basic question. Is that okay? Let me get that so that you folks can see your beautiful face. It seems that we find ourselves in the 250th year of the country, in a moment where the world that made our lives possible no longer exists. The world that made you and me possible no longer exists. It's been systematically destroyed in front of us. What has been and what should be the response of the Black church to the state of the country in the 250th year? Why don't you start?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You know I'm a Southern guy. I'm calling everybody today. My name is Reverend Willie. I serve as a senior pastor in the historic 12th Baptist Church in the Roxbury community of Boston. And as I think about your question, I think about the history of our church. We celebrate 221 years from the First African Baptist Church, 186 years as 12th Baptist Church. I think about the work of Leonard Grimes building this church to become the fugitive slave church, the second pastor, George Washington Williams. And the question really rings out to me is this one that comes out of the Psalter and one that comes out of the works of the prophets. How can we sing a song in a strange land? In this particular moment, in the face of Christian nationalism, in the face of MAGA, that question continues to return back to me because we as Black folks have always sang a song in a strange land. We sang about freedom during enslavement. We sang about democracy in the midst of Jim and Jane Crow and disenfranchisement. We sang about dignity when we were segregated, and we still need to sing our song today. And the goal of the work of the Black church is to have these courageous conversations rooted in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we have to continue to sing to America because we are living in a moment where there has been a weaponization and romanticization of history and theology. There's been a coordinated effort. I think you talk about this in the book. There's been a coordinated effort to shape the ways in which we view Christ through the lens of whiteness. And we have wrapped the flag around the cross. And because of that, the church has for far too long participated in the whitewashing of the gospel, even in the Black church. The thing about our church's history is that the Black church wasn't born out of any idolatry. It was born out of exclusion. Black churches didn't need to do anything to justify who we were. We knew that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and the invisible institutions reaffirmed us as we began to form and be shaped because we were kissed by the sun. The Black church isn't the one that used the Bible to justify the trafficking of bodies across the waters. It was not us that used the Bible to justify enslavement and oppression and exploitation. It was not us that justified eradicating folks and shaming them as being savages. It was not us that justified domestic terrorism in this country. We did not endorse Jim and Jane Crow. We did not endorse disenfranchisement. And let me make this clear. We exist not because of the white church, but in spite of the white church. And it is up to us to continue to engage what I call the ministry of memory. We cannot forget what we've done before to get through what we're going through right now. Our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our foremothers, our forefathers, they've been up against the fight before, and in the face of this darkness, we still have to believe that there are skills, there are true sets, there are instrumentalities, there is scripture. We still believe that in the midst of this moment, we can testify, for God I live and for God I'll die. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? In the face of white supremacy, we still are going to stand 10 feet down, 10 toes down, and say, God, we're going to overcome this with the faith that we have in you. So the black church has to preach, has to march, has to shout, has to endorse, has to be critical of itself. All right, preacher.
I have a difficult task. I got all of these brilliant minds and these preachers. And so I want to shift. Thank you. Appreciate you. Brother Dr. Obery Hendricks.
Yeah.
You've written a book entitled Christians Against Christianity. The Bible said that there's the whitewashing of the gospel even within the church. What does that mean in this moment, given that we are in second verse days? Talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I want to thank Dr. Howard for his great work for putting this together. All over Black church in America. In fact, that is an indictment of who we are and where we are. I also like to thank my dear friend and classmate at Princeton University, Glaude, for his great work. Well, you know, I grew up in a black church. In fact, I grew up in Calvary Baptist Church in East Orange, New Jersey, about 15 minutes from here. And I have a great appreciation for all the black church has done in shaping our morals. I remember getting my sense of somebodiness, my ethical compass. But at the same time, Eddie, you asked the question where we are now, 250. You know what? I'm not going to celebrate. There's something about the black church I'm not going to celebrate today, because if we were doing what we're supposed to be doing, Donald Trump would have never gotten Now, let me say this.
That part.
And I'm going to be brief, I'm not going to discern, but priestly, there's a priestly and the prophetic. You know, priestly, we have to worship. You know, we lift up our hands, we give thanks. You know, we get involved in spiritual supplication and all. That's the priestly. But the prophetic is speaking truth to power and changing the world. And we've done a very poor job of doing it. So, in 250 years, if we want to change, first off, we're under an onslaught of evil. And it's an anti-Christian onslaught, because they do not believe in love your neighbor as yourself, which is the basic core of the gospel. And if we want to stop this onslaught of evil, we have to stand up and not engage in as much as self-congratulation as we do throughout the church, but self-indictment. And we have to admit and confess that we have not been faithful, completely faithful to the prophetic call of the church. It has been ecclesiastical and ministerial malpractice. I got that. Ministerial malpractice, and we have to hold the church and the preachers. I'm going to hold us accountable for what we've not done and stop treating us like we have some kind of privileged status. We're supposed to be servant leaders, and if we're not getting our feet dirty, then we're not doing our job.
So we have two sides of the same coin. We have the description of the church as a kind of repository of the power, a repository of meaning, a space where we can engage in, where we have engaged in constructions of the self in spite of a world that diminishes and degrades. Right? In so many ways, setting up the conditions for the possibility of unity and flourish. And then we have the critique of that institution. Once it becomes institutionalized, it, in so many ways, becomes conservative and the small sense, right? In trying to what? Protect its gains, its status. You sow a seed that everything will follow. We won't get into that. Now, Reverend Dr. Anthony, how do you respond to that question, given the critique of the church and given the power of the church, given that you're leading one in these dark times, just as you lead one in dark times?
Well, blessings to all, and Bethany, you all can give yourselves some love and a round of applause. 155 years. I'm the pastor of Providence Baptist Church, the oldest African-American congregation in North Carolina. We came out of the woods, the Hush Harbor, in 1866. Our nation was still hot. And when we came out of the woods, I declared that the city of Greensboro, North Carolina is never the same, has never been the same, and the state of North Carolina has never been the same.
Absolutely.
Now, I think sometimes those who are outside of the church has a lot to say about the church, and they are not inside the church. I think sometimes the critique is too heavy on the preacher because the preacher is not the only one in the church. When I thought about what Reverend Willie was saying, the black church must remain the black church.
Yes.
I'm going to say that the black church.
Yes.
It must remain authentically black.
Yes. Yes.
Also, I think, let me tell a little story about myself. One day a black preacher got up and told people like y'all that there are going to be some black children. We're going to bring some black children here midweek, and they don't have a home and they don't have parents. Well, some people on that pew one day heard that, and they came back midweek, and guess who showed up? A little boy like me. And those people adopted me because of the black church. What am I saying there? 250 years, the black church has continued to do those kinds of things. They're taking care of one another. I think about, you're going to move to this. And since we got all the brothers, I want to bring up two women. Shipra and Pua, midwives. I think they never expected a better Pharaoh. They didn't even want one. They decided they were going to do something different. They were not going to be complicit. I think America right now thinks that we're going to be complicit to our own demise. And I think we have to do what Shipra and Pua did. They just simply refused. They did not obey the edict, and the Bible says that they feared God more than man. And then the Bible goes on to say that God dealt with them mightily and their families multiplied.
That's right.
So when I want to answer that question, I argue, stay black, take care of one another, but also, as you heard Dr. Harvey say that I say, in Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit of the Lord fell, Pentecost took place in that room. By the end of that chapter, nobody else was in that room. They ran into the streets and changed the world. They catch the Spirit here and run in the streets and go change the world.
All right, now there's some interesting pushback. Interesting pushback. I'm not writing anything down in the script. That pushback would be, Howard Thurman, his sister, the great theologian. He said that, we need to be clear on our conception of freedom. Understand what we mean by there are a bunch of us who are staying black when we're taking the bride. Pushback. A whole bunch of us were trying to figure out in this moment of such darkness, how do I protect me and mine, my wealth, and my achievements, and my cause, and my status. Right. So I want you to come back. I'm going to use that as no, you want to respond. I'm going to be democratic.
Well,
Well, now, democratic, you got to come to me.
I'm coming.
I got to leave.
Yeah, no, you come on.
Right, I got to leave, so hold it. You can hold it.
let's take you
Let me apologize because I'm on the road traveling. This was in Kentucky and headed to Atlanta about an hour and a half and then back up to Wilmington where they shot a young boy like cornbread early night. People aren't even talking about. And then over to Maryland where black folks decided that they weren't like Haitian black folk and divided the community and allowed white people to take over a black community and then invite ICE in.
Come on.
So I'm kind of conflicted up here. And I want to try to say two things as the pastor asked us before I have to depart. And I want to leave, but we have to because of something that's going on. When I remember Cone, talking to Cone before he died, and he reminded me that the term black church is a sociological description. It's not a theological description because it ain't in the Bible. The Bible ain't never talking about the black church, white church, green church, brown church. The Bible says that the church is supposed to say the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me. So black church is an attempt to describe a sociological reality. As Charles Long used to say, if you're in this bottom of the slave and you're praying to God, and on the top of the slave ship, you're praying to God, and the storm comes up, are you praying to the same God? And if you are you asking for the same thing? So in some sense, Dr. Glaude, some people want to wear the sociological title of the black church without doing the work. Because blackness is supposed to be the identification with pain, not just skin color. And in that sense, William Lloyd Garrison was just as much a part of the black church as Frederick Douglass. And you cannot understand the pushback against slavery without understanding the fusion that happened, black and white and brown and gay and young. You also have to admit, we got to be real careful because it was a black church that put King out. Membership and ministers. It was a black church that didn't pick up the poor people's campaign and was arguing over a whole lot of stuff. It was a black church and civil rights organization that after Dr. King laid out 3 evils, poverty, racism, the next morning papers and black organizations wrote resolutions against that vision. We can't dismiss that. If Dr. King at the funeral of the 4 girls were blown up in Birmingham, he listed out, he said, what killed them? He criticized racists, he criticized Northerners, he criticized Southerners, he even criticized people, black ministers who stayed behind the stained glass window. Let us not forget that of all the churches in Montgomery, there were over 100 of them, only about 12 actually organized. Now, the pastor asked us to address what does a public exorcism look like?
That's the second question.
And one of the things I think that you want to use the term black church or the prophetic church or what has to address, because I don't even say a Christian nationalist, because it can't be Christian and nationalist. We can't. Because one of the things you got to do with a demon is not let it use its own name. Let the demon use its own name. Then the second thing you got to do, as Dr. Painter taught us, is you got to remember and look and understand the roots of a demon. That it's not, most of them are not new. It has old roots. In other words, the Dr. Painter taught us that much of what we're seeing now is the psychological reality of what we have seen. It is this thing in America where we go forward and then we go back and we go forward. The other thing you got to critique the demon. The other thing you got to do is go where the demon is, and then you have to refuse to allow the demon to worship and pretend like it's God when it's not, and doing God's name. And then after the demon comes out, you got to help whoever it came out to fill it up, because Luke tells us if you don't fill the house up, the demon will come back 7 times stronger. So the question for us is, if the second Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement was about exorcising the demon, what did we not fill the American house up with that has allowed the demon to come back 7 times stronger? So we have to deal with the question that's in the movie Sinners. Who let them in? Because vampires can't come in unless you let them in. It's hard to ask that question, but you got to ask it, who let them in? Did 21% of black men voted for Trump? Let them in. Did 50% of Latino men voted for Trump? Let them in. Did black women voting less for Kamala than they did for Obama? Let them in. Did the fact that some 5 million black folk didn't vote? Let them in. Did the fact that over 50% of black folk didn't vote? Let them in. Did the fact that 90 million people stayed home, and we have the Congress we have today because of only 7,000 votes, let them in. We got some hard questions to ask in this moment, and not easy questions. Did the fact that we didn't have a march on Washington when the big ugly deadly bill was being pushed through, we didn't have a march on Washington in 2020 when we could have passed living wages and the Voting Rights Act and COVID relief, and we didn't have a march on Washington when the courts was telling us they were going to undo Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But now, after they took all of that, you want to have a march on Washington in the middle of an election year, which is not the strategy of the past, because they didn't march on Washington in an election year. They had free of summer in the election year. You only march on Washington when you got an agenda to exercise the demon. So why go have another commemorative march and spend $3 million to march in Washington rather than spending $3 million putting buses on the ground and vans on the ground and meeting the demon where the demon is, and that's an election in state places and polling places. Why not have a march on the poll? Why not have a march on the poll? Why not every church be a march on the poll? Every lodge be a march on the poll? And every barber shop and every hair salon need a march on the poll? And every university need a march on the poll the first day of early voting? Why ask people to spend $10,000 to get on a bus to go to D.C. rather than take that $10,000 if you're serious about exercising this demon in this moment? Go where the demon is. And the demon lives in state places and state power, and you respect that.
In Greensboro right now, for the last month, I have been meeting with black preachers and members of the black community, and right now we have established at least 100 churches are going to the poll on the first Sunday we can vote.
And what I'm saying is something different. I'm saying that why not Dr. King told us in 1965 at march on
This is
Washington.
a march.
No, at the end of the march, he said that the greatest fear of the greedy aristocracy was for black and brown and white people to come together, poor and low wage, and form a voting bloc that would fundamentally shift the economic reality of America. He asked that, and he said, go back to these states. He looked at voting as not just something wrong for black people, but a way, as Jennifer said, for us to stop continuing to sin. And when I say stop, I don't mean us. Most of us are doing right. Because it is a sin to fight for charity and not fight for justice. Because the Bible said, woe to those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children pray. P-R-E-Y. But the question is, early voting, for instance, in North Carolina, what we're saying is, let's have 1,000 marchers on the first day of early voting to be conspicuous. Go together so that when ICE comes and watch, let them watch us walk together. But not just black folk, but the attack of this current authoritarianism. I don't have time now. I'm there to try to take time for other folk. There are about 20 things that are happening simultaneously. This is authoritarianism, but it ain't the authoritarianism exactly like the past. And so part of what we got to do, I believe, is sit down and understand. I was in Germany recently, and they said, do you all really understand that what's going on in America right now may not be the end, but the beginning? That Trump may be the setup for the Hitler that will come. So these things like global realignment is now happening through election coup d'etats, not military coup d'etats. Right. That we got a group of folks stealing from the government so they can use the money to put chips in people's heads to track us and to make us, quote unquote, think faster than a computer. We have folks who want to use the money of the government, that's why they're stealing so much of it, to create what they call multi-species, multi-planet species. Now I know I'm sounding real crazy. You got people, the reason they're trying to break the government is so that even if those who want for minority to become majority are able through election to take over the government, you won't have anything. Right. The money will be gone, the structures will be gone. Yeah. So one of the things I think we have to do in this moment to understand the thing is we all of us need to do what I did a couple weeks ago. I admitted I didn't know nothing. And I got in the room with some experts on authoritarianism and some sociologists and shut my mouth. And some lawyers, and I didn't talk about what I had done, what we that bragging, living, no. We listened for 2.5 hours, and I didn't even know that in the last 2 months we have eradicated 60 years of legal progress, not just for black folk. And so if that's the case, the black church has to be, like you mentioned, Shipra and Pure, they fused, they brought everybody together. Part of our blackness has to be bringing us together, and I can tell you, we got some struggles. I remember when we started dealing with the poor folk, and I had a group of black pastors come to me and say, Reverend, we'll march with you if you guarantee the gay folk ain't gonna be here. We'll march with you if you guarantee that only black folk won't be there. No. And what I know from that is that blackness alone will destroy you. You can be black, but black cannot mean you separate yourself from other prophetic instruments of God, because God's got instruments of justice in every color, in every sexuality, in every religion. And that's part of all of our struggles, and I live with it. Because you look at me, I'm black, I'm Native American, I'm white. I know I'm black when the cops stop me, but for me to know who I got to own the fact that I'm black, that I come from Native Americans, I come from free blacks, I come from slave blacks, I was sexually abused. I got to own all of that. All of that, right? But the one good thing about the quote-unquote black church is it allows me to own it all. That's exactly. It is true, it's from what you're talking about. I can own all of that and be somebody. That's right.
Now, Reverend, this moral exorcism, this different, qualitatively different world. There's something familiar and something wholly unprecedented about it. How might we imagine, given the 63rd anniversary of the March on Washington, given Bishop Barber's critique of efforts, the symbolic gesture to march on Washington in this current moment. How do we imagine a moral struggle in this moment? Right? How do we think about the moral argument under current conditions? Does it require something else of us?
Well, what I actually want to acknowledge that we do recognize that black folks are not alone. And we actually never have been. And so I think it would be a fault to suggest that the suggestion even of a sociological framework around the black church has ever meant that everybody was on the same team. And we know that from Harry all the way to King, all the way to our current moment. And North Carolina is a perfect example of where that's happening all across the country. I also think there's a different conversation that we're not having around millennials. Around Gen Z. I'm probably the only millennial on the panel.
What you trying to say?
I ain't saying that. And I think where we are in this moment, that we're trying to put new wine in the old wineskins. And my peers are not talking about the black church as being the vehicle for any type of radical social change. And so if anything, I'm trying to reimagine the instrumentality of the black church in a way that meets all my brothers and sisters, my LGBTQ brothers and sisters, my very diverse community that's budding and growing within my black church, to really think critically about how we reimagine what it looks like to be a vessel and a tool for social change and social reimagination. And so I think right now, yes, ain't nobody trying to march like that. Usually, when we march, it's a trauma response, right? We were down there for Trayvon, we were down there for Eric Garner, we've been there, right, with George Floyd. And if we actually address this in a way which is happening, we're dealing with a technocracy. Like tools that generations before we dealt with, you didn't have to compete with. You weren't worried about the ways in which they're stealing elections. We knew that was possible. It's been happening for a long time. You didn't deal with some of the spying that's been happening with actors through social media and other different instruments. So we have to really think critically about what frontier are we fighting and what tools do we need. I believe the black church has an opportunity to be intentional about being better about exegesis. What I mean by that, I think there's too many preachers who get in the pulpit who lazily address the text. And because they lazily address the text, they lose out on the opportunity to engage and build the base that we need to actually fight the fight that we need. There are some folks who I know would be in church if you didn't bastardize them with your scripture. Not because we're not true to the text, but we're not committed to true exegesis. And true exegesis means that we have to dig deeper and not just regurgitate what I would believe the white theological frameworks that are handed off to many people through lazy reading of commentary. And what I would call intersectional discourse that allows us to actually realize what the text is saying to us today. I don't think the Bible is not still speaking to us. It still speaks to us right now. I still believe the gospel of Jesus Christ is still relevant right now. I still believe what Michael says to us, that we should do justice and mercy and walk humbly before our God. And if we're going to do that with this generation, it's going to take somebody who's willing to do the study and be prepared to not just tell people no or you can't ask that question, but actually engage them in real truth, study the text, and say, when I don't know, I don't know.
You said something, Doctor, that so much is heavy. And it made me think that if we do the exegesis in Matthew, when is the time that young folk get most excited in the gospel? It's after Jesus turns over the table. Yeah. In the temple. Right? He turns over the table in the temple. He takes on the system. He knows he's going to kill it. But then he starts healing in the temple the folk that have been pushed to the outer. It is at that point the Bible says the young folk got happy. Not because of a song. Not because of a particular kind of music, but because of a relevant ministry that brought in their families, no matter what condition their families were in. And the last thing I want to say about that is, as I move around lot of young people, millennials and others. I was talking to Erica Alexander, who used to be on BBC. She says that every time she goes to the room to talk about what's going on, she says, well, Bobby's been talking about this third reconstruction. Now, I'm not saying to talk about me, I'm talking about this third reconstruction. She says that they say, what is that? And they want to know about, and when you say we are seeing the attempt to destroy everything of the first two reconstructions and block the possibility of a third. And when she begins to talk about visions, she said there was a group of folk the other day, and they said, we are sick and tired of all these politicians doing critique. Where's the vision? Like, okay, we know affordability is an issue, but what you gonna do about it? If we give you power, like if you get the majority in the first 30 days, what are you gonna do about affordability? What are you actually going to pass? And so I think, as you say, this issue of people desiring vision, because critique can get you stuck just as bad as lazy exegesis. And one of the critiques, hear this number, in this couple states, in Georgia, in the last election, the total ballots of the cast was 5 million. The margin of victory was 115,000. The number of poor, low-wage voters that didn't vote was 1 million. The number of black voters that didn't vote was 450,000. The number of people that have lost Medicaid was 340,000. The number that lost SNAP was 210. The number one reason that the 800 to 1 million people that didn't vote, because the poor and nobody didn't vote, they said was, nobody spoke to our issue. 19 million people that voted for Biden and Harris didn't vote for Harris and the other guy, but the number one reason was she's a black woman, none of that. It was, they told us in 2020, if they got elected, they were going to fix the Voting Rights Act and pass it anyway. And once folks got elected, they didn't. That's some real stuff that's going on. The numbers are here for transformative change. But if we don't gather the stones that have been rejected, we cannot exercise the demon of this current day.
Brother Obery, put something on the table that actually echoes in so many things what you argued in Politics of Jesus. What do you make of this claim about exegesis and vision, these two claims?
Yes, as a New Testament scholar,
Yes.
as a New Testament scholar and as a former president of theological seminary, it's very important to me. I am involved in. And you're right, exegesis, reading the text. I mean, too often our preachers read it through white eyes. And I'm seeing this tremendous laziness. Let me give you an example. You ask folks, what is the core of the gospel? What did Jesus say this? Well, he said it's love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
But not many people know that. Well, we should know that. And we should know all of the implications of what love your neighbor as yourself means, economically, politically. I mean, one implication is that the Bible has a socialist ethos.
Yes.
A socialist ethos. We're supposed to be working for the society. And if we have a healthy society, then folks will be taken care of. Too often we talk about the symptoms and the causes are ignored. The white Christo nationalists are they're concerned with the causes because the causes are what serve them. But no, we talk, it's around the edges. The other thing is, we give an example. Gospel John says, Jesus says, tend my sheep. Part of tending his sheep, he's talking about the sheep, read the sheep. Part of tending the sheep is protecting the sheep. It is informing the sheep.
Yeah.
All right, there are people who've been complaining about having this kind of gathering in church service. Well, this is part of what the tending the sheep is about. Protecting the sheep. Now, my critique is, and I preached all over the country. I preached in several continents. I see it. Our church, and I have to talk about our leaders, aren't really protecting the sheep because why? So many of them are not informed. How can you protect the sheep if you don't know what it is that is assailing them? that is messing their lives up, that's destroying them. You have, when Mom Downey ran for mayor, I spoke to a group of ministers. That socialist, that Muslim. I said, wait, do you know that the Quran upholds Jesus 70-some times because of the Son of God, even upholds the Immaculate Conception? You know that Martin Luther King was a democratic socialist like Mom Downey? They don't know these things. They don't fight against a man. Look at the great things he's doing in the community. Because they don't know any better. So I have to say, even though I appreciate so much what the black church does on a pastoral level, it's so important. Our people need to be nurtured and cared for. But we must hold our leaders more accountable for what's happening. And be willing for folk to throw darts at us and say, look, you Negroes are not doing what you're supposed to do. Our people are suffering, and you walk around acting like you got a special privilege. Forget about the pulpit performance, and the tablet purveyors. Get up and speak to the people issues. And Jennifer, your father is extolled to this day because he realized that as a pastor, he's supposed to be a freedom fighter too. How many preachers are freedom fighters? We should be fighting for the freedom of all people instead of coming in and having fun and calling it church.
All right. I'm used to being the razzle-dazzle, but my goodness. What we do know is that we don't want to overgeneralize. What we do know is that there are churches, there are pastors in local communities who are doing extraordinary work.
Absolutely.
We know oftentimes the people who want to do wrong, the most harm, are loudest. It doesn't mean they actually outnumber us. Right? They're just the loud ones. You know what I mean? So we're coming to a close, because has this been a good Sunday morning? We're talking about a living gospel. We're talking about a transformative gospel. We're talking about the message of Jesus that is going to be activated, because we're going to catch it, and then we're going to do what? We're going to run, take it outside, we're going to run with it. Now, we are facing so many challenges. And what we experience in this moment, particularly with regards to black men. We talked about black men, we talked about Latino men voting for Trump. When we look at the data, black men are catching it on the chin. That doesn't mean other groups aren't catching it on the chin. But when we look at school enrollment, college enrollments, when we look at 30% of black unemployed have been unemployed for 27 plus years. When we think about wages and the like, how might this message translate, move to that demographic and the various age groups that we're talking about? Doc.
Well, I think we gotta be under. You gotta be with that graph. Jeremiah Wright wrote a book some time ago called Adam Went On. And he talked about how black men, in many ways, were driven out of the church. By sometimes preachers, by sometimes the way the church didn't welcome brothers in as they were. I think we have to transfer our churchiness and go where they are. So one of the things we're finding is being among the formerly incarcerated. What I'm hearing, I was with men last night in Kentucky, is, did you know that if we raise the minimum wage to $17 an hour, which, by the way, was one of the agenda points of the March of Washington in '63. That's what people forget. March of Washington '63 was about an agenda and a piece of legislation. It wasn't just about a gap, right? And it was to raise the minimum wage by 75% and index it with inflation so that it would continue to exist. If we'd done that, the minimum wage would be about $20 an hour today. If we were to raise it to $17 a day, $18 a day, 41% of all African Americans would come up out of poverty. Wow. Folks are looking for serious policy engagement, not just elect me and send me. I think that we have to say to folks today that are running for office, you must turn the page and talk directly to the people's pain. You can't expect the people that have lost Medicaid to come out and vote if they don't hear, if you get a majority in the first 30 days, you're going to correct it. There must be a offering of vision. There must be a serious critique with challenge to the realities that people are existing in. And the last thing I want to mention is that in the middle of this past winter, and Trump said in the first congressional district in North Carolina, he said, go down and take it. And they did. They redistricted. Now, they made a mistake. They betted it on 41% turnout, which means if we turn out 45%, the redistricting doesn't work. Exactly. But what we had to do to get people focused was in the middle of the winter. And the sisters ended up shaming us to some degree. We called for the biggest march since Selma. It was 51 miles in 4 days from Wilson to Rockland. Started with 276 people, ended up 1,000. But some of the very people, and I'm not overgeneralizing, said, Doc, I don't want to do that, and I can't do that. And what ended up happening was a fusion gathering, black and white and brown. Now, when we got to Raleigh, some folks showed up. Some. But what we learned also is that the voting went up during that week by 47%. Kind of we walked. When we were conspicuous in our action, it impacted people's engagement. The last thing I want to say about that, we're now mobilizing 1,800 black men to do the tech thing. 1,800 black men that are going to be reaching out to 2 million black men directly. Sometimes the brother got to talk to a brother, right? And we got to use this technology to be able to do that. But we're also looking at 1,800 black men up with 2,700 people that can reach out to 10 million infrequent, poor, and low-wage voters. And we're not asking them to vote for a candidate. We're asking them to own their power and vote for a vision and demand of these people that they give them a vision and help them to understand if you're not in this fight, voting ain't the only thing you have to do, but if you're not in this fight and you don't show your power, you will never be able to force structures to heal.
Reverend, we're going to bring this to a close. I do want to say this, that the answer for young black men, as we've been talking, is not to find comfort in patriarchy. Oftentimes what happens is that black men, just as white men, they think their material circumstance is actually a reflection of their inability. They're being blocked from the benefits of patriarchy. So they just think we need to be more patriarchal as the answer to their condition, right? But I want you, because you haven't had a chance to talk, I want you to offer your thoughts and then we'll call our session to an end, if that's okay. Reverend Bishop Barber has to go, so I'm preaching.
And I want to argue that black men do need to be affirmed, celebrated, and recognized, yes. But this patriarchy is driving them out of the vote. And what happens in the text is that when Peter jumps out to vote, what happens? He sinks. But when he gets back in the boat, that's when the storm comes. I want to argue that black men do not jump ship on black people right now.
Right.
Stay with us.
Yes.
Together, we will get to the promised land and we will get the votes that we need to make a difference in this United States.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Zachariah Jackson, Gospel News. Goodbye.